Both the Falcons kicker and punter are headed to free agency, but I'll explain why I think the kicker is safe, but the punter might be replaced.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Locked On Falcons, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in all of the galaxy. And of course, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka the iron that sharpens the iron. I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong here on Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. And on today's daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, we are reminding you how much special teams matters with 2 impending free agent specialists in the kicker, Zane Gonzalez, and punter, Bradley Pinion. I'll talk about the developing kicker market. What does that mean for Zane Gonzalez's impending potential return, as well as a potential path for the Falcons to pivot away from Bradley Pinion, and if whether or not they've already signaled that that is in the future. But let's start with the kicker, just because more recently on Sunday, we had 3 impending free agent kickers sign new contracts with their respective teams, right? With legal tampering beginning on Monday, as many of you are listening to this podcast. You know, we will see what happens with that. But Eddie Piñeiro with the 49ers signed a 4-year, $17 million deal. Blake Gillikin re-signed with the Cardinals for a 1-year, $2.65 million. And Blake Grupe re-signed with the Colts for 1 year, $1.4 million. And if you listen to a recent episode of the Falcon Squad, we were asked sort of who's the priority re-signing. I mentioned Zane Gonzalez. I remember during the season, talked about like if there was one free agent I'd pound the table to re-sign, it would be Zane Gonzalez, and every other Falcons free agent I'd be willing to let walk, but Zane would be the one that I would turn. I imagined sort of Zane's market would be for something close to veteran minimum, which would be about $1.2 million. Maybe you throw on a slight bonus or incentive to, match that groupie contract or something like that. But, it makes sense to me for the Falcons to prioritize the kicker, just because of how inconsistent the kicking game has been the last 2 seasons, the stability, or as Jarvis Davis would say, the operational piece that was given to us over the last, 6 or 7 games with Zane Gonzalez's pickup midseason. And so I think that's justified to bring him back. The Falcons could look at alternative options. I don't think it makes a ton of sense, looking at connections with the new coaching staff. You do have Nick Folk, who worked with current special teams coordinator Craig Ackerman in Tennessee back in 23, and he was very effective. I think he led the league in field goal accuracy in that season. The problem is Nick Folk is 41. He's basically 100 years old by kicking standards, and there's basically a ticking clock on when he decides to hang it up. And so, I think the Falcons will probably bring in competition. I don't know if it's going to come in terms of an impending free agent. It'll more likely be someone off the street maybe later this offseason. Now, another player that they could think about bringing in for competition or potentially replacing Zane Gonzalez is Jason Sanders, who was recently cut by the Dolphins. He missed all of 2025 with a hip injury, and the question is, will he be fully recovered from that? That's the question. Obviously, if it was an injury that kept him out for 3+ months, it could have lingering effects going into 2026. But prior to that hip injury, he was one of the best kickers in the NFL. He's actually 6 months younger than Zane Gonzalez at age 30. So that could be a possible path. But assuming that the Falcons do wind up retaining Zane Gonzalez, I'm not expecting them to try to bring in competition in the next week or 2 in March, right? If they are going to bring in competition for him, which I think should be recommended, it's very likely that will come, in April via the draft, undrafted free agency, maybe May or June after the UFL season is over. I should note before we continue that conversation that Zane Gonzalez was in Carolina when Chase Blackburn, who is now the Falcons' assistant special teams coach, was the special teams coordinator there. So there is that connection, which is all the more reason why Zane Gonzalez should be back. But, you look at that sort of wait till the spring season's over for the UFL, makes a lot of sense because we've seen a lot of teams be prosperous scooping up guys off of the spring leagues, right? Harrison Mevis, most recently with the Rams, Brandon Aubrey with the Cowboys, who's about to be the highest paid kicker in the league, Younghoe Koo for the Falcons. Even the Browns did it 2 years ago with Andre Schmidt from the UFL. And so, in general, I'm anti-drafting kickers. I've mentioned on the podcast before that rookie kickers tend to be very hit and miss. They're either really good or really terrible, right? It's like a 9 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10. And that, to me, those odds aren't in your favor. And I recently looked back the last 10 drafts. There have been 21 kickers drafted in the last 10 years. The average drafted kicker as a rookie made about 82% of his field goals. The average undrafted kicker as a rookie in that same span made about 81% of the field goals. So basically, that data is telling you that drafted kickers don't really outperform undrafted ones. Now, maybe there's data that suggests over time drafted kickers do outperform undrafted ones, but part of that is probably due to the increased investment, that teams are much more patient with drafted kickers than the undrafted ones. But that would require further research. But the preliminary research suggests that that's not the case, that, drafting kickers does not give you a boost. And I just bring that up because I'm consistently being told by, whether it's a Locked On Falcons insiders, commenters, or whatever, that, the Falcons, if they just draft this kicker, this up and coming phenom college kicker, they'll solve all their kicking problems. And basically, I'm here to tell you that no, the data says that they probably won't solve the problems. And the only thing that they will solve by drafting a kicker is, what's the best way to waste a draft pick is by drafting a kicker. So all that to sit here and say, it'll be interesting to see what the Falcons' plan is at kicker, but I fully expect Zane Gonzalez to be back at the team's earliest convenience, but ultimately we will see on that front. But it will be interesting to sort of see what methodology that the Falcons approach, if they approach one at all, to bolster the competition in that kicking room, to make sure that it is not an area of weakness and concern and inconsistency like it has been for most of the last 2 years. But as we try to figure out what the plan is at kicker, I feel like the Falcons have already hinted that the plan at punter is to move on from Bradley Pinion. And we'll talk about maybe his replacement being a cold weather specialist that is looking for a warmer temperature. And we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So the pressure is high in the NFL, and so it is in your workplace, with deadlines, overflowing inboxes, and the one position you have to fill sitting open. When the pressure is on, you need the right hire. Indeed is all you need. Indeed Sponsored Jobs is going to help you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for, with the right skills, experience, and location, so that you're not just hoping that the right candidate stumbles across your post. Now, over the next minute that I'm talking to you, companies like yours will have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job that premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Now, we live in a world where we can stream anything, order food in minutes, and we carry supercomputers in our pockets. But somehow, buying tickets to a live game still feels complicated. Whether it's hidden fees, jumping prices, or endless steps, there has to be a better way, and now there is with Game Time. It gives the advantage back to the fan and makes getting tickets simple, whether we're talking NFL games, concerts, comedy, music theater, whatever, right? You get the panoramic seat views, so you can preview your seat before you buy. And the price that you see is the price that you pay. You get no surprises. When you show up with the panoramic seafoods, no surprises at checkout, because the price you see includes all the fees. So 2 taps and you have great seats locked in. It's fast, it's easy, it's done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets by downloading Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. So, in addition to Zane Gonzalez, Bradley Pinion is also a free agent. And I'm wondering if the Falcons are already making plans to move on, right? Because it was notable to me that the Falcons did decide to re-sign practice squad punter Trenton Gill to a futures contract at the end of the season. Now, Gill was picked up in the final week of the season because Bradley Pinion's wife had her due date, and the team was bringing him in, Gill, that is, for insurance, just in case Pinion missed that last game. He did not miss that last game. And it's just notable to me because, like, the Falcons re-signed the punter on the practice squad, but not the kicker, Lenny Krieg, that we spent, all of last year talking about. Oh, he's the future. And it probably doesn't mean anything, but it is notable that Gill was a punter that Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, the new Falcons general manager, drafted in their original draft in Chicago back in 2022. Now, they wound up drafting Trenton Gill's replacement 2 years later in Tory Taylor, after 2 lackluster seasons in Gill. But it is notable that at least Ian Cunningham, is familiar with Trenton Gill. Now, I don't think Gill is going to be the replacement for Bradley Pinion. And if you were asking me, how much money would you be willing to bet on Bradley Pinion not being the week 1 punter? I wouldn't bet a lot, right? I would still bet on Bradley Pinion being the week 1 punter. That would be the safest bet. However, I think there is a path for the Falcons to upgrade, right? When you just go and look at, impending free agents, the Browns have a punter in Corey Bojorquez, who's been the Browns punter for the last 4 years. He is an impending free agent, and he's been one of the NFL's better punters these last couple of years with PFF grades. He was 10th in 2025 and top 5 in both 23 and 24. And here's the thing about Bojorquez is he's a cold weather specialist, right? He spent 4 years in Cleveland, 1 year in Green Bay, and 3 years in Buffalo. And, if he's as good as he has been in the cold weather, imagine how good he would be playing in the dome 10 times a year or whatever, right? According to True Media, in games where the temperature at kickoff was over 70 degrees since 2018, since Bojorquez came into the league, he ranked 6th in the NFL in terms of the highest percentage of punts placed inside the 10-yard line. Meanwhile, in that same category, over that same period of time, Bradley Pinion is 23rd and roughly translates to average when it comes to pinning teams inside the 10 in warm weather, even though Pinion has played the most games because he's been in Atlanta, he's been in Tampa Bay, as well as San Francisco over the last 8 seasons. And, recently the Browns special teams coordinator, under new head coach Todd Monken, who's new there, basically said a statement last week that basically sounded like they're going to let Bojorquez test free agency, despite how good he has been for the Browns in the last couple of years. And so I think there's a path for the Falcons to upgrade that spot. Now, I think the price for Bradley Pinion and Bojorquez would be roughly the same, about $2 to $3 million a year. That's about middle of the pack for punters. It'll get you in the top 10 if you get to about 3 million or more. And so would the Falcons push that to entice Bojorquez to, hey, come on down where it's warmer, Bojorquez. I know you're from Southern California. Atlanta, the weather is not as good, but it's still pretty good, relatively speaking. You just got to worry about the summers. That Georgia heat's going to get you, but you're not used to that, but you'll get used to it. It'll be fine. Right. So I wonder if I think there's a path for the Falcons to upgrade their punter as opposed to kicker, where, essentially, I don't think there's really a path to immediately upgrade kicker, whether we're talking about free agency, whether we're talking about the draft. But I do think there is a path, if the Falcons wanted to explore that, to go after someone like Corey Bojorquez in free agency. And that would be a potential upgrade over Bradley Pinion. So we'll see if the Falcons explore those options. Wanted to get this last, special teams takeoff because, this is the only place where you're going to get 15 minutes of primo special teams content because it matters so much here on Locked On Falcons podcast. And if you're looking for more content, as we will be covering this first week of free agency all week long, this first wave of free agency, hopefully we'll see the Falcons make some moves, whether that's for a kicker, a punter, or, probably arguably more important positions, but don't let me hear you say that out loud, okay? Because I will come for you. But we'll see. We'll be having it covered all week long here on the podcast, guys. So, looking forward to it. Eagerly anticipating the moves that the Falcons will or won't make. We'll see. Again, I expect it to be a relatively quiet first couple of days, and then maybe later in the week we'll start to see a flurry of moves, but there probably won't be too many big splashy moves, but we'll see. Always, free agency is always an interesting time. So we'll have it covered here all week long. So make sure you subscribe to YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Locked On NFL will obviously have you covered for all things free agency. Locked On NFL Draft will keep you geared up for the upcoming 2026 draft, which is 6 weeks away. I mistakenly said 7 weeks on the most recent mock draft Monday. The time change got me. That's the excuse, right? And we will keep doing it. I don't know. You guys know I'm terrible at outros. So that being said, check out the Everydayer Club, right? Free agency. We're here for you. Free agency's here. Check out the Everydayer Club. We'll be having it covered. We'll be having the discussion in the Locked On Podcast Network Premium Discord. You get an ad-free version of Locked On Falcons if you join the Everydayer Club, and if you use the coupon code Free Agency, you will get your first month free, right? So go check it out. Free agency, no spaces. Hit that link in the description below at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com to find out more. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, guys. Your team every day.